here we go.
Yes. Okay, we're set? Great. Okay, so we had some technical difficulties, but let's start the webinar. It's really my pleasure to welcome you all to this webinar about decolonizing the curriculum. I will maybe start by introducing myself. I'm Sana Hadouchi. I work at the University of Antwerp. I work at the team diversity of the university, and I also represent our university in the YUFE D&I work package in YUFE. So the topic of decolonization has gained much attention in higher education, but of course, attention doesn't mean that we are where we want to be yet. So in that regard, the University of Bremen applied for a YUFE D&I grant and took the lead to organize this webinar, and they have kindly invited the University of Antwerp for this occasion as well. So we have gathered a really nice group of mostly students, two from each university and one staff member from each university to prepare questions for an interesting discussion with none other than our guest, Professor Wekker. So I will give the floor to Aram for some technical points.
All right. I don't hear anything right now.
Aram?
Arum, you're on mute.
I'm trying to set up my.
Okay.
So you guys, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
So it's supposed to be a full one, but let me check. Was it a full one, a slideshow or something? What do you see?
Yes.
Yeah.
See the slides.
So yeah, I just want to welcome you again, everyone. But I don't think I like this setup. Let me go stop my sharing. Okay, I'll do it again. Yeah. Oopsie. Okay, it's supposed to be like this. Yeah, can you see it now? Okay. So yeah, I just would like to share with you some of the technicalities. So I am Arum. I'm partly the coordinator of YUFE for D&I lecture series. So basically, all the technical stuff that we have been facing with lecture series. So I'm helping you with this. Before we start the lecture, I think I also want to mention that YUFE and all of our activities in line with our code of conduct, which you can see it here on the screen, the YUFE community. Let me know if you are not really, it's not really clear, but it's basically how YUFE community, how we do activities within YUFE. And also, as also mentioned by Cassandra, this webinar is going to be recorded. By participating in this session, you have already agreed that consent that we can use this recording, and we can also probably post it in other channels of YUFE communications. So related to questions, there will be plenty of opportunities to ask questions, but I would suggest you to use the Q&A box a function so that we can also, we don't miss your questions to the speakers and all the panelists here. Of course, I will also keep an eye to the chat box just in case you want to give some comments or some quick questions. So it's fine. So I think that's all from my side. Without further ado, I will hand it over to Cassandra to moderate today's discussion. Welcome again, everyone.
So welcome everyone. Today's discussion will be moderated by myself and Sana. My name is Dr. Cassandra Ellerby. I am the Officer for Diversity and Inclusivity within the YUFE, Young Universities for the Future of Europe project at Uni Bremen. So our agenda for today is that I will introduce Professor Wekker, and then the University of Antwerp students will briefly introduce themselves, and then these university students from the University of Bremen will briefly introduce themselves, and then Professor Wekker will give her lecture input or impulse talk, and thereafter students and staff will be able to ask Professor Wekker one question in the beginning. And I'd like to say Professor Alicia Heinemann will be giving the honor of asking the first question because she has to leave. She has students waiting for her. So if it's okay with the students, please be so kind and allow Professor Heinemann to go as the first question. Thereafter, we will open the floor for Q&A from the audience, and then there will be closing statements, and then the webinar will be finished. Okay? And on that note, I have the greatest honor and pleasure to introduce Professor Gloria Wekker, who holds a BA and an MA from the University of Amsterdam in the Netherlands, and a PhD from UCLA, which she completed in 1992 in social and cultural anthropology. She is specialized in gender studies, sexuality, African American, and Caribbean studies, and is a professor emerita in the Department of Gender Studies, Faculty of the Humanities at Utrecht University in the Netherlands. Wekker, together with co-authors Michael Botman and Nancy Yao, is connected to the introduction of intersectional thought in the Dutch-speaking world with the edited volume Kaleidoscopische Visies, de Zwarte, Migranten en Vluchtelingen, Vrouwenbeweging in Nederland, which was published in 2001. An updated English version of this foundational text will appear in 2023. Her other books include The Politics of Passion, Women's Sexual Culture in the Afro-Surinamese Diaspora, which was published in 2006. And she was awarded the Ruth Benedict Prize of American Anthropological Association in 2007. And White Innocence, Paradoxes of Colonialism and Race in the Netherlands, which was published in 2016, that caused quite a stir internationally. She has written more than 100 articles which have been translated into Spanish, Portuguese, Bulgarian, and Mandarin. Wekker has advised the Dutch government on minority health and women's emancipation policies. And in 2015 and 2016, she was the chair of the Diversity Commission at the University of Amsterdam, which resulted in the report, Let's Do Diversity, published in 2016. And I highly recommend everyone to read this report. I have a PDF copy of it. I'll be more than happy to share it with all of you after the webinar. In 2017, she was elected one of the 10 most influential Dutch academics by Science Guide, and she received the prestigious governmental Joke Smit Prize for her lifelong efforts on behalf of Black, migrant, and refugee women's emancipation. In addition, she was the recipient of a Black Achievement Award in the category of academia. Between 2029 and 2021, she occupied the King Wilhelm Alexander Chair for Lowland Studies at the University of Liège, Belgium, and in 2022, she is the Amnesty International Chair at the University of Ghent in Belgium. Wekker publishes prose and poetry and is included in several anthologies of Surinamese Dutch poetry. She is currently working on a mixed genre fiction, nonfiction book about her 4 grandparents entitled Families Navigating Empire. And on that note, I will hand over the mic to our colleagues at Uni Antwerp, who will briefly introduce themselves.
Thank you, Cassandra. Maybe it's, I've already introduced myself, so I'm very happy to leave the floor to maybe the students first from the University of Antwerp. I don't know who wants to go first.
I can go first if it's okay with Pauline. So I'm Gloria Conde. I study pharmaceutical care at the University of Antwerp. I'm my last year, my last master year. So that's a brief introduction.
My name is Pauline. I'm a PhD student at the University of Antwerp studying communication studies, and I'm also the president of the YUFE Student Forum. So it's especially from that role that I'm eager to learn and to share insights and things like that. So thank you so much.
Thank you both. I will also give the floor to Noel Klik to introduce himself.
Hello everyone, my name is Noel Klik. I'm professor at the university. I work on ethnic inequalities in education, discrimination, but also on the issue of European identity.
Thank you, Noel. And then it's Uni Bremen's turn to introduce themselves.
Since I already introduced myself, I hand the floor over to Patience, Hannah, and Leah.
Hello, my name is Patience Amankwa, or Patience Amankwa. I'm a student of the University of Bremen, and I'm also a student assistant at the diversity office at our university.
Hello everyone, my name is Hannah Tayyip. I am a student at the Marine Biologies and a chairperson of the Muslim University Association at the University of Bremen.
My name is Leah Fischer. I'm doing my master's in professional public decision making, and I'm a member of the YUFE Student Forum.
Yeah, I haven't handed the floor over to me, but anyway, I will introduce myself. I'm a professor for diversity education and learning passages at the University of Bremen.
Thank you all for the brief introductions. And on that note, I pass the mic to you, Professor Wekker.
Okay, thank you, Cassandra. Dear students and organizers, thank you for inviting me. I know it's been quite a journey to get to this place that I can speak to you. So I will be talking to you about the experiences of the diversity committee that was operative at the University of Amsterdam after the occupation of the central administrative center of the university. It's called the Maagdenhuis. And that occupation lasted from February to April 2015. I will start off with one of my favorite quotes by Nobel Prize winner for literature, Toni Morrison, because it is so applicable to our topic, basically to any topic, if you ask me. She's saying in this essay called Home, I have never lived, nor have any of us, in a world in which race did not matter. Such a world, free of racial hierarchy, is usually imagined or described as dreamscape, Edenesque, utopian, so remote are the possibilities of its achievement. This is important now. How to be both free and situated. How to convert a racist house into a race-specific yet non-racist home. How to enunciate race while depriving it of its lethal cling. Here the quote closes. So these words enunciate a program for us to attain to. The concept of race is a greatly under-acknowledged part of our common sense and academic knowledge production. Just yesterday, I want to note in passing, there was a recognition on behalf of the Dutch government that there is institutional racism in the National Tax Office here. The National Tax Office has targeted people of color, people with double nationality, automatically through you know, the input of data is automatically making people of color suspects of tax frauds. This is a new chapter in a range of affairs that we have seen lately, which showcase racism in the heart of Dutch government. This would not have been possible, this consciousness, this new consciousness of race and racism in the heart of the Dutch state, say 5 to 10 years ago. So even though one of my conclusions will be that the Diversity Commission, of which I was the chair, though it accomplished little, its work has contributed to a heightening of awareness of race and racism in the Netherlands. So going back to the quote that I started with, Toni Morrison's quote, what was central in that is her array of questions. How to be both free and situated, she's asking. How to convert a racist house into a race-specific yet non-racist home. How to enunciate race while depriving it of its lethal cling. So what she's asking us to do here is not to be colorblind, not to be racist, of course, but to be aware of how race functions in our societies, these European societies, which all have colonial pasts. And the gist of the work that I have done is to show how that colonial past is not a thing of the past, but it has an afterlife. It lives on in all domains in society, not least in the academy, and we need to understand the ways that race functions as a silent but powerful organizer of ourselves, of our institutions, including knowledge production, and how it functions as an organizer of society as a whole. And that has been an important part of my life's work, to investigate the ways in which we got to this place where we are at with race, pretty much still the pink elephant in the room, how we dance and tread carefully around it. But as I showed with the example of race in the heart of the Dutch tax office, we are slowly coming to terms with, and we are starting to name race as a fundamental grammar of difference. So at the end of the occupation in April 2015, 3 committees were installed at the University of Amsterdam, and the third one was the Diversity Commission. It came into being under pressure of especially students of color. And this is important to note. They were absolutely vital to this committee being established. The students had started a series of lectures during the occupation, and I was one of the speakers. And they had started asking questions like, why is my university so white? Why are all my teachers white? Why is my curriculum so white? One of the banners on the Maagdenhuis read, no democratization without decolonization. This firmly connected democratization and decoloniality, the set of ideas that departs from the inside, that modernity and coloniality operate hand in hand. And that became part of the reform agenda. Another good thing that the students of color did, they had organized themselves in the University of Color. They wisely built alliances with various constituencies in the university, among others, the Central Workers Union, the Central Student Council, and a whole range of other, mainly white organizations. So the commission, the Diversity Commission, was installed in February 2016, and we delivered our report in October 2016. Its main aim was to advise about diversity at the University of Amsterdam and how to promote diversity. Commission consisted of 5 members, and we were supported by 14 paid students who were our research assistants. Most of them were of color. So we did quantitative and qualitative research. And of course, in this little period that I have at my disposal, I cannot go in to all the various parts of research that we did. There were 4 projects, but I will focus here especially on decolonizing the curricula. So this project focused on the University of Amsterdam as producing and offering broad, inclusive knowledge. It was a qualitative project, and it was aimed at giving recommendations and determining the state of affairs with regard to knowledge practices at the University of Amsterdam. So what did we want to know? What is being taught and researched? In which ways is that done? Which forms of education are offered? And how is knowledge produced? To what extent does this do justice to the diversity among staff and students, and to the diversity in schools of thought? The methods that were used in this project were interviews, focus groups, or diversity discussion circles, where teachers who were already practicing diversity were brought together to exchange best practices and to give each other advice. And also, what was important was analysis of selected curricula. So what were some of our points of departure in the committee? First, the main overarching aim of our work was to bring about more social justice at the university. A university that strives towards equal chances for all people. A university where everyone can feel at home, which requires an active attitude towards diversity. That's why we called our report, Let's Do Diversity. It is not about talking about diversity all the time, as Sarah Ahmed also points out in her work. It's about doing it. Secondly, decoloniality was very important and leading in our thought. It is a wide conglomerate of thought that is held together by the shorthand, modernity is coloniality. It means, among other things, first, we need diversity of people who are present in all segments of the organization, and we should discontinue the racial/ethnic segmentation of people of color who are overwhelmingly located in support services, the cafeteria, photocopying, and cleaning. Secondly, diversity not only pertains to people, it also, and importantly, pertains to ideas, approaches, schools of thought that are not solely focused on Western thought. This means widening the existing canon and enriching the canon with non-Western academic perspectives and pedagogical approaches. We want a university that is conscious of the historical processes within which knowledge has been and is produced, a university that is conscious of its impact on the social and natural environment. Thirdly, as far as points of departure go, we want to talk about intersectionality, which was also central in our toolbox. It is a way of thinking, as you will know, in which not just one grammar of difference is addressed at one time, like gender in gender studies. That is the main apparatus that we work with. On the contrary, I have been engaged with introducing intersectional thought in the Netherlands to the effect that several grammars of difference are working simultaneously. It is never enough to just work from one grammar, like gender or race, which doesn't exist, that kind of concerted approach, class, sexuality, all of them are working simultaneously. They are co-constructing each other. So when we depart from gender, we need to ask all the time, so what is happening with race in a particular situation, with class, with sexuality, with mental or physical ability, with religion? By way of example, in 2016, during a period of heightened academic attention for diversity, the Minister of Education, Dr. Jet Bussemaker, announced the appointment of 100 extra female professors in the Dutch Academy. The Netherlands occupies a pitiful 19th position worldwide in terms of the share of women in full professorships. And Cassandra and I, in the past, in 2007 or 8, have done research into the Dutch Academy. How many of those women of color, full professors are of color? And we came to the conclusion that it was less than 1%. So when these 100 extra female professors were to be appointed, our committee warned that if this initiative isn't interpreted in an intersectional way, then all 100 of these professors will be white women. And that is how it turned out to be. Except one or two, 98 of these 100 female professors are white. Conclusion, taking only gender into account, or race, or sexuality, or any single grammar doesn't do the job. We need to work intersectionally and think it. The fourth general point of departure that I want to mention is that we took as our creed, diversity is a precondition for academic excellence. It is not just a nice circumstance to be working in diverse theme, in diverse ways. It is a precondition for academic excellence. We take this creed from US Ivy League universities, and we should pay attention to that, because it has now been shown over and over in different fields that diverse teams make for superior results. They have more inclusive thoughts and approaches. They think of more possibilities. Why would that not be the case in the academy? A final point of departure of our committee was that our report and its recommendations are not just good for faculty and students of color, but for the entire academic community. White students too will have to function in a society in which particular skills of diversity, intersectionality, and decoloniality will be an asset. What is the role of the university if it does not impart those skills to our future leaders who will have to deal with ever-increasing diverse audiences, publics, whether they are doctors, politicians, or writers? I will finally refer you to the entire report for its many recommendations, but I will mention just a few items that are relevant to decolonizing the curricula. So first of all, we need to keep in mind, we should move from supposedly egalitarian to diversity capable or diversity literate capabilities. In order to do that, so we tell ourselves that we are in a meritocracy. If you bring the right qualities, if you are smart, you are curious, you want to learn, you can thrive at the university. This obviously isn't true. Many studies show that. So we should move away from this egalitarian spirit, which not only finds a home in the university, it is more or less present in Dutch society as a whole, as I've written about at length in White Innocence. We should move from this myth of egalitarianism to diversity capability or diversity literacy. In order to do that, we have to develop a non-threatening, non-stigmatizing vocabulary. Because I don't know how that is in Germany. I know a little about Germany and Belgium. In the Netherlands, we still have to develop a vocabulary, a lexicon, as far as race is concerned, race/ethnicity. We noticed in our interviews that people are capable of talking about gender very easily, and one would have to be a Neanderthal to oppose the notion that there should be more women in higher positions in the academy, but it is very difficult, we found, for people all across the university to talk in a respectful way about race, ethnicity. So there are all kinds of different assumptions underlying our attitudes toward gender on the one hand and race, ethnicity on the other. So we should be developing vocabulary, lexica, to talk about race, ethnicity. People are really uncomfortable with race, ethnicity. And we should disseminate, we should develop this language, we should disseminate it through voluntary courses, included in academic skills courses, and in the training courses in which we educate beginning and advanced teachers. Then the second general recommendation that we gave as a committee, we need to move from closed knowledge to open knowledge. That is to say, when you look at canons in different disciplines, you will see that the main writers that are being studied, the founding fathers, let's say, are white men. We need to open up these canons and include other kinds of knowledges produced by women of color, by trans people. We should turn away from this very limited way in which we have conceptualized the canon and in which we keep repeating a very limited kind of knowledge. We need to develop courses in which we look critically at the beginnings and the genealogies of our own disciplines. To me, this is vital, that we teach our students how our disciplines came into being and the role that coloniality played in those genealogies. We should study that. It is opening up our horizons in which particular knowledges got validated, other knowledges got ripped off, knowledges originating in the South and became disqualified. It is absolutely vital that we start studying these processes. We need to create space for divergent perspectives and make sure that those people who are already working with diversity in their teaching material, in their curricula, are not punished or excluded. A lot more to be said about that, but I will await your questions. As a final note, I indicated already, not much has come of our recommendations, I have to admit. The deepest drawer at the University of Amsterdam has been found to deposit our report into. When everything had calmed down, 9 diversity officers were appointed, a chief diversity officer and 8 in each of the faculties. Probably needless to say, since these people were acquired, were mobilized from the sitting faculty, all of them were white, 9 white men and women. I rest my case. I will now give over the floor to questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this wonderful input, Gloria. And before we move to the questions, I wanted to give a shout out to Ankara Mame François Evans, who was one of the first people within the YUFE project, and Sana, correct me if I'm wrong, who did a lecture on the topic of decolonizing the curricula, and thank the goddess and the gods for LinkedIn. I found her and I invited her to be with us today here. So welcome, Ankara. Thank you so much for joining. And on that note, I open the floor up. And as I said before, Professor Heinemann has to unfortunately leave us early. So I'm going to give her the floor to pose her question if you are all in agreement with that.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Laura, for this wonderful talk and the insight in your report. And actually, I have one question which is going around with me for quite a while now, and I think perhaps you have the experience to give a good answer to this. The thing is, if we decolonize the classrooms, the universities, we are still in a society which is very much impacted by the colonial legacies, right? And so I have in my seminars white students, students of color, then I have white students which are very much, are very leftist and have thought about all these things very much. And I have students of color who haven't thought about all these things and are very much assimilated to the hegemonic mainstream discourses. And when I teach in these classes and teach about especially these subjects like decolonizing, racism, discrimination, etc., I often have the situation that I say something or explain something, and then students of color or white who haven't really had the chance to reflect about these things before, they're sometimes like, no, I don't feel like this. For me, it's very okay. For example, in German, we have this question, where are you from? And then I say, okay, this is a problem, this is racist, if you always ask people where they're from. And then a student of color says, no, for me, it's okay. You can ask all the white students in the room, you can ask me whenever you want where I am from, like this. And this is just an example for this situation in the classroom with all these different positions, where I come and say, hello, we want to decolonize this, and talk about different things. And perhaps you have an idea, or you can just share your experience, how you are dealing with the situation. That would be very interesting for me.
Yes, okay. Well, thank you, Alicia, for your question. Well, you know, that is in itself an interesting observation, which I don't encounter here in the Netherlands, by the way, because it is students of color who are a driving force behind this movement. They took the white students with them. And of course, also during 2020, the Black Lives Matter summer, which was also big here in the Netherlands, it was Black people who took the initiative. So I think this speaks to how important it is to study these different situations that we find within Europe, of who is thinking and talking and driving the discussion in the various nations in Europe. And would this not be connected to the fact, well, one might think of the status of the concept of race in society at large? Because as far as I have learned, Rasse in Germany is not a concept that has been homeschooled into people, right? I have understood that it is very much a contaminated concept after World War II. People feel that it is not applicable, we should avoid it. So I can imagine that it is a hard concept to even talk about. So this this problem that I also touched upon in the Dutch context, it is Black people who have put race/ethnicity on the agenda, politically, academically. And when I hear your experience, I'm very grateful that we have played that role. And among the younger generations, particularly, I see, I've just, this past Thursday, I was in a space where my work was being celebrated by African diaspora communities, where I was talking publicly with 3 young African women, students at the University of Amsterdam, who are talking with a vocabulary, a lexicon that I'm totally, you know, enamored with. I mean, it's not to say that they are happy, they see lots of problems, but they know how to speak about it. So I don't know whether I can really address your question because it is so tied up with the history and the sociology of the concept of race in Germany, how it has been treated, and why is it that white students have caught on to those discussions and students of color haven't?
Yeah, but it's not all students of color. No, that's not what I said. It's just a part of it. They are very powerful, very, very brilliant students of color, of course, who are exactly like you are explaining it now. It's just that we have this mixture in the class, in the seminar room, in the classrooms, like some who I haven't heard before about it before, and some who are very, very powerful. And yeah, that's more. It's not that we don't have this in Germany, of course.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah, but still, I think that as an outsider, I am relatively badly placed to answer this question. But to me, it is very important that also students form their own networks in which they talk with each other and teach each other, like Black students amongst themselves, kind of educate themselves and each other. I would really recommend that.
Okay, I see that Enkra has her hand up.
Yeah, I actually just wanted to add on to that to see if I could. Can everybody hear me okay? I'm currently in Ghana, so sometimes technical issues can play a part, so just making sure. I just thought that I could maybe add something helpful to that, if possible. So I was teaching the course, The Idea of Africa, University, which I co-created, and very, very interesting questions about. Sorry, can you hear me?
No, you fell away a little bit,
Oh,
so it's a little spotty.
Okay, is this better now?
Yes.
Yes.
I think one thing that was really helpful for me was to, before I started my classes, have a concrete conversation about how no one here is an ambassador of their identity. So just because you have Black students or immigrant students in your class, that's not necessarily the fact that they occupy that Blackness themselves fully and get to speak fully out of that on behalf of other people. And having that conversation, I think, allows students to both appreciate something that's come up from another student, but take it in a contextualized form. And that was always really helpful when navigating those class discussions for me.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that makes sense. Really, that speaks to me, because all too often that is what happens, that students of color are supposed to speak on behalf of their group. And of course, we should take into account that students are at different places and cannot be expected to be, as you say, the ambassador of their, which is then an essentialized identity. Absolutely.
So if I may move on, then I give the ball to Antwerp. They get a chance to pose a question.
Great.
Thank you, Anke. I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
Yes, it's Inka.
Okay, is there someone from the University of Antwerp who wants to pose their question?
Laura, if you have a question, please go ahead.
Thank you, Professor Wekker, for your insightful lecture. So I'm Gloria and I study pharmacy, and I have realized that during the course of my path in diversity and inclusion and decolonizing the curricula, I find that the academic places are finding their way into the topic and they're starting to talk about the topic, but mostly of the most of the time when we talk about the topic, it's really exclude healthcare facility and healthcare discipline like pharmacy, how can I say it, I don't know, I can find the word in English, like pharmacy, but doctors and other healthcare disciplines. And so I will ask you, like, what can we do, or how can we take a step to also include more scientific disciplines into the decolonization, instead of just like the most obvious one that people always see? Because also in science or just math, for example, you can also find a way to decolonize the curricula, but they're always saying like it's more science, it's numbers, 1 + 1 is 2, so we can change 1 + 1 it will always be 2, but you can always find somewhere a way that you can see like this is really always focused on white math people. They're not included Arabic met people in the past. So that's more my way, like how can we make science and healthcare also more inclusive in this topic?
Yes, okay, very clear question. Thank you, Gloria. Yes, well, what for me has been an incredibly insightful text in order to wrap my head around what coloniality has done to the development of the sciences is this book by Sandra Harding. And let me see if I can find it so quickly, its title. I may have to look it up and give it to Cass later so that I can share that. Wait. I'm looking it up right now. The Racial Economy of Science Toward a Democratic Future, Sandra Harding. The Racial Economy of Science. What she was one of the first ones to show to me, at least this is the text that set me on this path of how important, how absolutely crucial it is for us as teachers, but also for students to make inquiries into how our disciplines came into being. Because in this time when the Western European nations started out on their voyages of discovery, all kinds of new knowledges were necessary, from sailing, how to build boats, what kind of diseases people would incur after these month-long journeys to the south, for instance, to South Africa. It took months to get there. So what kind of food did people have to take in order to restore their health? All of the circumstances of coloniality demanded new knowledge. New questions were being asked. And of course, also in the fields that you're talking about, medicine, pharmacy, what kind of plants needed to be planted, for instance, in the botanical gardens in South Africa, so that the crew could continue their journey coming from the Netherlands, going to South Africa. They were on their way to the East Indies. They had to be fed and given good medicine on their way to the East Indies. All of that was influenced by coloniality. To me, it has starting to read those texts have been really mind-boggling. It has opened my mind to how crucial it is to take that starting off point in coloniality into account, whether it's about cultural anthropology, the study of languages and literatures. All of that has been ingrained with a basic hierarchical positioning of different kinds of knowledges, that Western knowledges were by far superior to the knowledges that were taken over by Western powers and taken from the South. So I think that this book that Cass just put into the chat will be a very useful starting point for you to start thinking about the genealogies of our disciplines, but also how that is still to this day, we are living the afterlife of slavery, in that the typical person who experiments, medical experiments and medicines are tested on is a white male, and that others, their conditions are measured by standard man. That, of course, what you see, how you see it reflected also to this day is, for instance, during COVID, what were the data that were supplied to us? We here in the Netherlands got data that were thought to be important on gender and on age, not on race. It took inordinate amounts of exertion to come by those data. We supposedly are still so much in thrall of the disease is colorblind, it can hit everybody, that we simply do not think supposedly it is important to collect those data. Of course, we do have those data by connecting different databases, but we pretend that since race isn't here, we don't have to collect these data. So all of these different angles on the disciplines you mentioned are important, the beginnings, but also how we still live the afterlife of slavery in the ways in which we disregard data on race. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your answer.
Okay. Thank you both. Now back to Uni Bremen, and I'm just with an eye on the time. Leah and Patience, you'll have to decide amongst yourselves who goes first with the questions.
Patience, please go ahead.
All right, can everybody hear me? Yeah, first of all, thank you for this insight on your work and this great talk. So I study languages and educational science. So my question would be, so if we think about the hidden curriculum as knowledge that is kind of part of every classroom and every seminar, and also as if we think about the classroom as this space that is governed by power relations, how do you think does this hidden curriculum impact the learning experience of students? And also, what do you think, what kind of measures can universities, but also schools as spaces of power and privilege, what kind of measures can they take to counteract these negative effects that a hidden curriculum can have?
Yes. Well, this is basically what the report is about, right? The report that you will find on the intranet of the University of Amsterdam. But of course, the hidden curriculum is incredibly important. This is supposedly what we all agree on as practitioners. What is important in our disciplines? Who are the founding people, but secretly, that is the founding fathers of our disciplines. It's not the founding people. It's not women. It is men who are mostly crucial in our disciplines. So I could go on and on about what the hidden curriculum consists of. It is often not reflected upon. What I find also looking at the various universities in the Netherlands that I have a tie to is that, as I also have experienced myself, it is often people who are eccentric in one or more ways to the composition of faculty in a particular department, who are the ones coming up with diverging perspectives, with other knowledges, other people we need to include in the curriculum. Which is not to say that the people who have been teaching in that department are necessarily welcoming to that new knowledge. In my experience, and I must say that I also count myself among these people, when I look at the University of Amsterdam and the departments in which they have had Black people teaching, their plight has been unbearable. Since there was no ombudsman at the university, I, for a while, played that role, although I had no official connection to the University of Amsterdam anymore. But people were suffering, especially women of color, from a combination of sexism and racism and exclusion that was really hard to bear, in which their knowledges were disqualified and undermined. So, I mean, there is no easy answer to these questions that you pose. We need to get together. We need, for instance, one of the recommendations would be, do not hire people who are divergent from the main character in a particular department, which will be mostly male and white. Do not hire these people one by one. You see the same thing happening at the police or at the fire department, where there are mostly white men working. So policemen or firefighters of color just don't have a life there. White women nor women of color have a life either. So you need to hire little clusters of teachers of color, faculty of color, men and women who can support each other, so that you are not the only one. And I myself, I took early retirement, since the things that I wanted to do, among others, write this book, White Innocence, I just couldn't get it done while at the university. So I could name like 10 recommendations how to really be serious as an institution about inclusion and diversity, but you will be able to look that up in the report.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patience. Okay, who's next? With an eye on the time, because we also want to open the floor to people in the audience. So Antwerp has no more questions. If not, I will give
Noel?
someone. Oh,
Noel put his hand up.
so sorry, Noel. Excuse me.
Hi, thank you. I don't want to take the time away from the students, so I don't know if it's okay that I ask a question now. Is it okay? I was just wondering, and I was also triggered by the text that came along with the invitation on European identity and what is European identity, and YUFE wants to stimulate stronger European identity. And we've been doing research on European identity, and what we saw is that, for example, ethnic minority students in Flanders identify more as European than that they identify as Flemish, that they feel belonging to Flemish identity. So the attractiveness of European identity is what we found now in several studies, seems to be stronger for minority students. And the idea we had is maybe it's a more abstract identity, but that makes it maybe more easy for people to identify with and to construct it and imagine it in different ways, while the Flemish or national identities are quite exclusive, racialized identities. But also at the same time, of course, the European colonial past and present to some extent, and how it's also tied with European identity. So I was wondering, is this something that you also came across in your research or in your work, that the idea of European identity, while having very also a negative connotation or a problematic past, could also maybe be a potential for the future in super diverse societies where national identities may be less relevant to bridge differences?
Right. Interesting question. We actually didn't study that. And I personally haven't studied it either, but it would of course be an exceedingly interesting topic to study in different European nations that have student populations of color, because I am struck mostly also by the differences between, for instance, Belgian Black students and Dutch Black students. But as I say, I haven't studied it. I do see that I would be interested, let me put it that way, in different categories of Black students. Like, are there differences in identification, when I take the Dutch situation into account, between ex-colonial students coming from the ex-colonies versus students who had parents coming from Africa, for instance, or who themselves came from Africa? That would be something that I would be interested in, if they share the same identifications and what that would be. My hunch would be for the Netherlands. When I hear Black students talking, that they claim Dutchness. They are, and that may be also a generational, people of my generation have overwhelmingly felt, people coming from the ex-colonies have overwhelmingly felt, we are kind of visitors here, we really are Surinamese. People of younger generations claim Dutchness. We were born here, we have the same rights, we're not putting up with this racist shit anymore. So we see people in their 20s, 30s, 40s who firmly claim Dutchness. And so this would be a very interesting topic to further pursue.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, one question for Unibre. I see Pauline, you had a question. I was trying to go back and forth between to give everyone an equal opportunity. Oh yeah, what do we do now?
Feel free to give the floor to Uni-Bremen students who want to ask a question.
Okay, we don't have anything from the chat box, so then we can use the time for the panelists then. Okay, who's now? It's Bremen. So, please don't make me choose. It'll be between Hannah and Leah. You both have to decide amongst yourselves. Hannah?
I can start, sure, if Leah doesn't want to. Okay. First of all, thank you very much, Professor Wekker, for your input. It was very informative and I really enjoyed it a lot. I had actually in the beginning a very similar question to Gloria because I'm also from having my classes in a scientific field with mathematics, biology, and so on. So I also have noticed a lot in my classes the fact that professors and teachers are using examples from scientists and knowledge based on a European foundation without acknowledging or even mentioning the facts of other possibilities of scientists and people of knowledge who were also very successful in the early years, which was also documented in many books. And I find it very unfortunate when I have studied them personally in school, which is also not in a German education system, and noticing this fact completely differently in the German system that they are not focused on. So I also always have this desire of approaching the professor or the teacher and giving the different kind of options that are also available. But I basically never really have a very good method or a very good approach for approaching the professor as a student who's basically going to seek knowledge for giving a different perspective on things. So
Yeah.
do you have there an advice?
Right. Okay. Yes. Okay. I very well understand your question. Given the power differential that is operative, of course it is hard, and it would help if there are more students with different perspectives that you could go collectively to such a teacher. Another way to approach this would be, I don't know if you have that in Germany, that there is a body in the university where students are members of the curriculum committee. And they can advise teachers on interesting learning material that should be included in the curriculum. That might also include inviting a particular professor, if that is from Germany, from Europe, or from the US or other places, who is specialized in non-traditional knowledge approaches within your specific discipline. So I don't know enough about these fields that you mentioned, biology, mathematics, what have you, nor about the specific fields that Gloria talked about, but I am certain that there must be people who have written about this, about academics from of Southern origins and from centuries past who have already contributed to your particular discipline, and people who are specialized in that now, so that you don't have to carry the burden by yourself. But you know, I am very sorry to inform you that it is exceedingly important that you start doing and talking to your professors anyway, because this knowledge will not come to everybody automatically. So it is hard as it is, and aware of the power differential and that you may be dependent from somebody who may not be open to it or something that may influence your grade, it is still important to talk about these things, because it may also, you know, having access to these other knowledges may influence your own writing and thinking, and then you are moving in a direction in which it would be helpful that your own teachers are at the very least, aware of these different approaches. So that is what I would say to that.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Many thanks. I am looking with the eye on the time. It's 20 after, and there's a question from the audience. And I'm wondering if there are questions left. Leah hasn't had a chance, and neither has Pauline. I'm wondering if we don't get to those questions, if you could mail me your questions and I will forward them to Gloria, and Gloria could perhaps answer them. Would that be a possibility for both of you? Yeah, okay. I would like to, if it's okay, I would like to, the question in the audience. Arun, would you like to read it? Since you're taking care of the chat box, in the Q&A box, there's a question.
Okay. So this is anonymous attendee giving a question. So we've got actually plenty of questions here. The first one. So I'm in a diversity work group for our department, and we're trying to and succeeding in changing a couple of things. However, time and time, it's always the usual suspects who are interested. I'm struggling with reaching those other people who are not impressed by decolonizing/diversity initiative. Is it even possible to reach those people who are not impressed by decolonizing initiative? Or should I wait until they simply leave, as they are from an older generation? Okay. So the writer is a PhD student, and he thought might sound like I've given up. So okay. But honestly, sometimes I don't see how we can change the university from within. I think that's all of our problems here with D&I issues, right? So yeah, do you have any comments about that, Professor Wekker?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so there are different schools of thought here. What to do about these older people who are actually probably not going to change, although I do not want to disqualify anyone. I have a colleague in South Africa who I talk with about these issues. He's a Black guy, and he's a dean of education at one of the universities, and he is saying, I am reserving my money, the money that I have at my disposal, to invest in young faculty, faculty of color and white faculty, to invest in them so they become literate in diversity and inclusion. I do not want to invest anymore in older white people who are only holding up the process. I think, you know, that maybe if you are going to have to make changes anyway, this might be, oh, did I lose you?
We just didn't see you for a bit, but we heard everything you said.
Okay, so I'll continue with this without the image, because then I can see the question. Okay, so what I'm thinking is, in order for a diversity process to take off and to be sustained, you need several things. So as in the case of Amsterdam, you need grassroots initiatives, so students asking for change. And so that also ties in with the question I just answered to Hannah. You need to speak up, because how else are the teachers going to know that the knowledge they impart is incomplete and unsatisfactory, and that you need other stuff? So you need students speaking up. You need allies in the middle of the organization, but most of all, you need a top at the university who speak out and act on behalf of diversity. They should put their money where their mouth is. This, of course, this latter layer in the organization didn't deliver. So it was a fad for a while, and it was hot and cool to talk about diversity, but then students, they matriculate, they leave the university, then a whole new generation of students needs to be brought up to par on where we stand. So in a sense, that is also a very comfortable position for the powers that be to be in, because of the turnover in student bodies. So that middle layer of teachers and PhD students who are interested in bringing about more diversity and inclusion, they in the end will also be an incredibly important group of people to sustain this movement. Yeah, so that is what I would say.
Okay, if it's okay with everyone, I'd like to give Pauline and Leah the possibility to pose a quick question, and then the one questions in the chat, I have the email address of this person, and I would, if you would be so kind, Gloria, I would then forward you this question and ask you if you'd have a moment to answer it. Would that be okay? Because we're almost out of time. I mean, I can go over. I don't know what everyone else's schedule is like, but I wanted to be strict with the time. So Leah and Pauline, can you make it quick? And then we'll wrap up the session.
Yeah, if it's okay, I would start because my question kind of connects to what Professor Wekker has just been talking about, because I feel like often, at least in the faculties where I am, students do speak up and they do ask for a more diverse curricula and contents to learn, but then either there are professors and teachers who say, yes, okay, yeah, that's that. And then those ones are anyway already often quite far at teaching more diverse contents. But then there are those professors who don't want to do that. And then they always point at the freedom of research and teaching. And that's a very strong argument in the whole discourse in Germany, that whenever professors, they don't want to decolonize their teaching, they don't want to teach more diverse, and they say, well, this is freedom of research and teaching, and then the discussion is over. The rectorate says, well, that's how the law is, and then we can do nothing. Do you know that problem? Do you have any idea how to tackle that argument?
Yeah, this is a very complicated issue. And right now, like every day, if I want, I can go to a forum or a workshop on woke, how woke is threatening our freedom of speech and our freedom to do research and what have you. I am more, I find that a rather disappointing stance to take refuge in the freedom of research and teaching, because as you see society changing around you, you know that the skills that will be asked of future leaders in society demands diversity and inclusion. To me, it also demands awareness of built-in inequalities in the system that you're a part of. Will people be convinced by this argument? I probably don't think so. I mean, because one of the wonderful things of the university, of course, is that you have your interests and you are free to engage with them as you like to define them. The reflections I have of them, as I just spoke about them, will not convince many people. But I think for the coming time, there's also something to be said about numbers. The more people the more teachers who are accountable to the arguments I mentioned, the better it is. And there may be differences in the culture that is springing up in particular disciplines, so that others will want to get on board too. But there is no magic bullet on this issue. I think it is important also to, speak out. This is another aspect of this issue. I find that in traditional academia, there is a certain penchant towards positivist ways of knowing still, like what is objective and not personal and repeatable, and all of those characteristics of positive science that also needs to come in to the discussion that there are different ways of knowing. And even that kind of basic datum has not been incorporated by a lot of people. So there are all kinds of different angles on this issue. Yet, I don't think we will get everybody thinking the same way, but as things stand, the power dynamics are still very much in favorable of this, this free place where one is free to do and think and teach whatever one wants. Yeah, so that is what I would say.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Pauline.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you also, Professor Wekker. Other people have said it, but for your inspiring session and the exchanges that we've been able to have here, I'm very inspired, and I've taken a lot of notes for further reading and further learning. I kind of want to ask a question that Professor Crick also kind of touched upon, is kind of the discrepancy between our European project as YUFE Alliance, where several European countries come together, versus our European countries and our institutions separately. Because I'd like to hear your stance or your reflections on basically deconstructing this coloniality from an overarching point of view as one YUFE alliance, or kind of more focusing on the bottom-up approach of deconstructing coloniality within our individual institutions. Because as you kind of have touched upon, we need to be aware of how race functions in our European countries with our colonial histories, but I don't know how you kind of look towards that, but are there, for instance, meaningfully different colonial histories within our European countries, within these institutions, that kind of necessitate this really kind of bottom-up individual approach first, in order to effectively deconstruct coloniality, that we can then bring to this YUFE level, this European level, as an alliance, basically? I don't know if you have any thoughts or reflections on this type of project, or if it's a dual process. I'm really curious to hear what you think.
Yeah, I would have to think about that more. It is clear that there are differences between different European nations in their colonial configurations, between the UK and France and Germany and the Netherlands, not to speak of Portugal and Spain. And those differences will also show up in the universities and the kinds of knowledges that are produced there. So those differences we need to study. I think intuitively, I would go for a bottom-up approach. But as I say, don't pin me down on this, but this is how I think intuitively, that we first need to study different kinds of colonialities, colonial systems within different countries in Europe. How does that show up in the knowledges at the university? And then we can come to a place where we may make an overarching argument about coloniality in the European realm. And not to be too overly confident, but I really would like to see how white innocence is present in all of these different nations. And I'm pretty sure it will show up kind of everywhere, because there's no other way to deal with the colonial past. Well, you can be proud of it, as some are. We had this empire in which the sun didn't go under. You can be proud, or you can deny and ascribe innocence to yourself. But there are not very many more possibilities out there. So that is how I would go about that.
Thank you.
All right.
So thank you so much, Gloria. And we're a bit over, but I still wanted to give each student just a moment to say one takeaway from this discussion today. Some people have written in the chat that they had to leave already. Thank you to all of those that were here and that had to leave. And so to make a closing statement, I would ask each student or each panelist to make one to mention to Gloria one takeaway quickly from today's session. So I'm going to Leah.
I maybe begin because I really need to run to pick up my kids from kindergarten. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much, Professor Wekker. This was very inspirational. And I think my main takeaway is to have more energy to speak up and to not stop trying to convince professors and talk to them. And I took a lot of reading material with me that I can look into after this. So thank you very much. And it was really lovely. Thank you for being here.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
Be so kind and just go.
Maybe my takeaway will be that the power really rely on the students, that we as students have such a powerful place at the university, and that we can bring a movement within this decolonization.
Mm-hmm.
And then I will continue. Thank you again very much for this inspiring talk. And I think my takeaway would be similar to Gloria's takeaway, that we as students, we really have the power to influence how the university will develop in the future, with intervening, with our writing, with what we share in the classroom. And then I have to read this report that you were talking about. So
Okay.
Sorry, Hannah. Do you want to go? Okay, thank you. My personal takeaway, thank you so much, Professor Wekker, again, is as someone who wants to strive towards an academic career, hopefully sometime in the future, to really kind of create these safe spaces where these aspects of coloniality can be addressed from students as well, and also kind of reflect on my own research, my field of science, communication studies, and really go deeper into these genealogies of the disciplines, as you were saying, and really kind of first of all, have this awareness myself of where it comes from, and to hopefully also impart this knowledge on others later on, so that this knowledge of the genealogies kind of really gets shared and that people are aware of it. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much again also from my side, Professor Wekker. For me, it was also a very inspiration, and I took a lot from it. And I think I agree with all the feedback for all the other students that they just gave, because I feel exactly the same way. And I foremost take also that even if as a student I try my best and I will not be able maybe to impact the professors or the university itself, I would learn enough then to put an impact myself in the later future, when I will be basically working as a hopefully professor too, who knows.
Yeah, okay.
To give my own impact on it too.
Yes, all right, good luck.
If I can share a takeaway as well, thank you also from my side, Professor Wekker, for your insights. I really thought it was fascinating. For me, as a person who is in a team diversity, I really take with me this idea that even though if you have recommendations or very active student population who works on these recommendations, or a team diversity, it doesn't mean that it gets implemented. So that's a frustration that we have as well, or something that we strive to work towards. So it's really keep on pushing, and I also think that exploring this sense of white innocence, and keep exploring that and pushing others to explore that as well, is something that I will take with me. So it's yeah, it was really really insightful. Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Arum, thank you so much for your work. I know you have to go. I'm very grateful. Thank you. We'll be in touch. Have a great day. Noel, did you want to say something?
Yes, maybe also thank you, of course, for this inspiring talk and the discussions. But also, I think indeed from my position as a professor, then as a research professor, also making more or focusing more on the collaboration with students in developing curricula, but also, of course, in doing the research, because I'm mostly doing research, in working with participants, not just as, of course, as respondents and people that give me data, but also people that inspire and give insights on reality.
That is great. Good luck.
And if I may, I want to say, Miss Gloria, thank you so much for your time and energy. And I'm eternally grateful that I can always come to you crying about these issues. And you always have wonderful words of wisdom to help build me up. Thank you so much for your time and your energy.
Okay, it's my pleasure, Cass.
And on that note, thank you everyone for your attendance. It was wonderful. And I think this is just the beginning of a conversation that will go on for a long time. And Pauline, you as the president of the Student Forum, I would like to give you the task of speaking about this in the meeting with the other students. You have power as president of the Student Forum, so use it. That's the wonderful thing about having privilege. Use it.
Absolutely, will do. Thank you.
So everybody, have a wonderful day and we'll be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye. Bye. Bye. Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Gloria, I'll call you.
Okay.
I'll call you. Thank you,
All
Sana.
right.
I think everything was okay.
I think so too.
Yeah, and it was
We
really,
can
as
breathe.
always, yeah.
You can breathe. It's okay.
Yes, I'm relaxed now. It's done. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll be in touch and
You
yeah.
will.
Okay.
Yes.
Have a great
Thank
week.
you.
Enjoy
Thank you for
Kingston.
everything. Yes, I will.
Okay.
Bye. See you soon.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank
Ciao.
you.
Ciao.